Welcome on in, everybody. This is the All Aussie Rules podcast. This is episode number 21. This is our round 8 review of season 2024 of the AFL season. Welcome back if you're a returning viewer slash listener, and welcome on in if you are new. I appreciate everyone that gives any support. So thanks for that. This week's episode, we're going to have a little bit of a change. We're going to get rid of some of the fluff that we put in. We're going to go just straight review of each match, and then on the Wednesday episode, we'll just do straight previews, and then most of the other stuff, so the award leaders, the power rankings, and stuff like that, is going to be pushed towards other content on Twitter, Instagram, whether it's infographics or it's short videos and stuff, TikTok and Facebook. That's the plan. I'll still do my tipping results and rundowns each week in the podcast, but it'll just be tipping and then reviews in this episode, and then on the Wednesday episode it'll be the preview of each match and then a little tipping section at the end. That's the plan going forward. As always, like, subscribe, comment what your favourite team is. Let me know what you think of my thoughts. During my reviews, we're going to start having a look at some of the player ratings. I give a little bit more in depth than I previously have. So that's the plan. That will look better in next week's episode. Just as I add more and more to it. But for this week, we'll still look at some of the top players, whereas next week we'll probably have a little bit more of a look at how each player went compared to, not every player, but key players went compared to their usual rating. Without any further ado, we'll have a look at how my tips went this weekend. And you can see quite a bit of red. Four losses were the 4 upsets of the weekend. Obviously, I tipped Port Adelaide, where Adelaide got the win. Went for Carlton over Collingwood, and Collingwood returned to form with a good win. Sydney got the win. St Kilda got the easy win, so those two were right. I went Geelong because they were undefeated and they hadn't been doing anything wrong, so I couldn't go against them. And Melbourne took the chocolates in that one. Essendon got over the line just over West Coast. Fremantle took care of business down in Melbourne against Richmond. In the biggest upset of the weekend, the Bulldogs got beaten by Hawthorn. And then the final game of the round was Brisbane beating Gold Coast at the Gabba. So we went 5 out of 9. We moved to 49 out of 72. So it's not a great performance from us, but at the same time, we're out there fighting. We'll keep going. We got 9 the week before, so it's not horrible. We're fighting our way back into the season. We will now look at each match from the weekend. This was obviously my infographic from before the game started. So that's not stats from the game, just to let you know. I don't have any graphics for the review, but I'll read through some of the stats and we'll go through the match. As we mentioned, Port Adelaide did get the... No, they didn't. Port Adelaide got the loss in this one. I don't know what I'm talking about. Adelaide win 12 goals 678 to 5-18 48. So Adelaide scored about what you'd expect. Port Adelaide were a long way below what you'd probably expect in this game, mainly due to their poor kicking at goal. They did have 6 extra shots than Adelaide. They had 10 extra inside 50s, 10 extra clearances. So a lot of key factors. Port Adelaide won, but they just kicked 5 goals 18. Don't get me wrong, Adelaide deserved the win. They converted, they did what they needed to, and they got the win. So they moved to 3-5, resurrect their season a little bit. Port Adelaide dropped to 5-3, and all of a sudden aren't looking quite as good as they were 3 or 4 weeks ago. Adelaide did have more of the ball, mainly uncontested ball, whereas Port Adelaide won the contested football. So that was an interesting part of the game, I guess. Outside of that, it just came down to poor kicking. Port Adelaide dominated territory, especially late. Well, in that whole fourth quarter, basically, but just couldn't convert. Adelaide got over the back a few times and managed to kick a goal, or kick the last three, just to kick away a bit and end up winning by 30 points. Yeah, I don't know. Port Adelaide, what do we make of them? I don't know. They're struggling a little bit. A key thing I think from this match to note is Port Adelaide went into this with the best tackle differential in the AFL, and Adelaide's were 15th at minus 6.8. And Adelaide went and won the tackle count by 8. So not a huge win in tackle count, but when the 15th team at tackling beats the number 1 ranked team at tackling, you gotta wonder what went wrong with Port Adelaide on the night. Were they not there? Did Adelaide just come to fight that day? I don't know, but that's just something that I noted from the game. And yeah, another key issue I think Port Adelaide had was their disposal efficiency. They went at 64.6%, which is horrible. It's one of the worst of the year, especially outside of wet games, but it's even lower than what a lot of wet weather football teams would rate with their disposal efficiency. That's very, very low. And conversely, Adelaide was 72.5. So Adelaide were pretty much smack bang on their usual, whereas Port Adelaide were minus 9% roughly. So that's just a sign of how far off their usual game Port Adelaide were. Didn't bring the tackle pressure, didn't dispose the ball well. They still got plenty of territory, but just couldn't convert it into goals, and that's pretty much the tale of the tape. Interesting thing from the game was Port Adelaide did play Connor Rose after doing his hammy. The week before, it was apparently just a little nick, just a little strain, and they played him again this week, and against all odds, he didn't make it through. Bad decision in hindsight. I mean, even in foresight, a lot of people probably were suggesting it wasn't the best idea to be playing him. He got subbed out at 3/4 time, and he didn't play that much. I think he played about 50% game time. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't moving very freely, so that was a bad decision in hindsight, and maybe if they had their time again, they wouldn't have been playing him. Best players for Adelaide, I had Jake Saligo on top. He was the award winner for best on ground in the showdown, and I gave him a 96, and the 3 Brownlow votes, 96 out of 100. I thought he was very, very good. Next tier, I had Matt Crouch, 91, as with Butters and Wines for Port Adelaide. They were both 91s. I had Josh Worrell and Rory Laird with 90 for Adelaide, and then a whole stack of players across the next couple of points with Rankin 89, Dawson 88, Dan Houston an 89, and then Bergman and Horn Francis 87s. Key notes, I don't know if there's too many, other than the fact that Rose, ended up 70. I've lost him. Can't see him. 76 I gave him out of 100. Obviously subbed out at 3/4 time, so he was playing pretty good football, but he just wasn't there. Few injuries from the game. Ned McHenry got injured late, so I don't know how serious it is, but a little bit of something to note there. Obviously, Rose got subbed out at 3/4 time, and then in the last quarter, both Todd Marshall and Georgiadis got injured. So Port Adelaide did fall to pieces a little bit with their injury list at the end of the game, but they were never really in the game. A lot of their good players played very well, but in the end, they just wasted opportunities forward, and they kicked 5 goals for the match. You're not going to win too many games of football if you only kick 5 goals. On to Friday night football, and we went to the MCG for the Carlton versus Collingwood rivalry. 2 different seasons for these 2 teams. Carlton obviously 5-2 going in. Collingwood 3-1 after losing their first 3 games. They've turned their season around, and that continued here. Collingwood win this one 12-13-85 to 12-7-79. So Collingwood kicked the exact same score they kicked against Essendon, 12-13, which is about their usual. Carlton were a bit down on their usual score. Obviously, before going into the game, they were averaging 100 points a match. They only scored 79 here. Carlton did have more of the ball, but as Vossi said, maybe the Collingwood pressure made them over-possess it a little bit, which I would kind of agree with. If you look at the territory battle, Collingwood dominated that. They had 64 inside 50s to 38, which is a massive, massive margin, especially when they only won by 6 points. Shots, Collingwood had an extra 5. So you'd say probably Collingwood were the better team on the night. Carlton made use of their opportunities, and that nearly got them the win. They led at quarter time. Collingwood came back, led at half time. Carlton then dominated the third quarter, scoring at least in a pretty even actual gameplay quarter. And then the final quarter, Collingwood just dominated field position for 95% of it. Carlton did manage to go and score 3 goals, but in the end, Collingwood kicked 4 goals, 5 in the last quarter, and that was just too much for Carlton in the end. Other things to note, Collingwood's centre clearance and clearance game was terrible against Essendon. They got absolutely smacked. They managed to turn that around this week, which was surprising because Carlton had been doing pretty well at it recently. So for Collingwood to win clearances by 4 was a massive result for them. Collingwood, as per certainly recent times, won the turnover battle. They had 6 less turnovers, which is always, I think, a key factor for Collingwood in their gameplay. They like to bring the pressure, force turnovers, and then obviously nobody wants to turn it over when they have the ball, but pretty even contest without being even, if you get what I mean. Like, a lot of the stats were wildly different, but like the game was close most of the way, and some key factors were very close. The major stat that Collingwood won was tackle differential. They were the second best in the league going into this game. They were clearly going to be number 1 now after this one. They were plus 34, which is a ridiculously high number, and Carlton are not bad at tackling. Like, they have plus 5.29 a game going into this. So a massive performance from Collingwood in the tackling and all-round pressure. They were very, very good, and that's probably the reason they won this game, if you ask me. Their pressure was outstanding. Best players and stuff to note. Lockie Schultz got suspended. He's got reported and reported and subsequently suspended for a week. Bo McQuarrie got knocked out massively, so he won't be playing this week. Zach Williams, he got subbed out with a soft tissue injury. I can't remember if it was a hammy or a quad, maybe. One or the other, I think. He got subbed out at 3 quarter time, so I doubt we'll see him this week. Also for Collingwood, it has since the game been announced that Myercheck did a hammy injury, so he won't be playing this week, and he'll probably miss a few, probably 3. And I believe also DeGoey and Tom Mitchell, who did not play this week, will not be playing this week either. So Collingwood a little bit undermanned going into this round, but we'll see how that affects them going forward. Best players, Nick Dacos had a lot of it. He kicked 2 goals. He kicked the game winner. If you haven't seen it, which you're probably living under a rock if you haven't, go check it out. Very good goal from the clearance. So he was best on. I gave him a 98. He was very, very good. He gets the 3 Brownlow votes as well. 2 and 1 Brownlow votes go to Newman and Akers. They had a ton of it for Carlton. They were very good. I gave them a rating of 96 and 93 respectively. Pendlebury played his best game of the year, 94. Lipinski, I also think that was his best game. He did kick 4 goals a few weeks back against Port Adelaide, but I think this was a much better all-round performance from him. Harry Mackay was great. He kicked 4 goals from limited opportunities. He got an 89. Sam Walsh, 91. I think Paddy Cripps had 22 touches, kind of similar to Pendlebury, but he just wasn't as effective, I don't think, as Pendlebury. So he was probably one of the big name players that didn't get close to their average. I gave him just an 81 out of 100. Interesting that Carlton had Matthew Kennedy as sub. I thought he was very good the week before, so I don't know why he started as sub, but that's not for me to make a call on, I guess. And yeah, Lockie Sullivan made his debut for Collingwood, kicked a goal first. With his first kick, he was very good. He came on as sub and played just over half. Well, came on about halfway through the second quarter, played about roughly exactly 50% of the game time for the match, and I think he had led the game in score involvements, so that's a good achievement from him, seeing he missed probably, I'm going to say half the scores, but obviously Collingwood had 5, probably 8 scores before he was on the ground, and then he was involved in 8 of the remaining 17 or so. So he had a good performance as his first game, and Collingwood get the win, so they go 4-3-1. They're sitting just outside the 8. Carlton suffer back-to-back losses after losing to Geelong the week before. They're now 5-3. Same as Port Adelaide, just needed to probably find a way to get their season back on track, because they've lost a couple. All 3 of their losses have been winnable games, but they definitely need to try and turn that around, and it's not going to be easy, because they go up against Melbourne on Thursday night at the MCG. Melbourne obviously coming off a massive win over Geelong, so they got their work cut out for them, Carlton, this week. Going into Saturday football, we had the battle for the bridge, Sydney v GWS. This had all the writings on the wall of being an absolute cracker. Perhaps didn't quite live up to that, but both teams going in at 6-1. Obviously, Sydney home game at the SCG. They went in as slight favourites, and they proved why. They wasted some opportunities early, kicked 2 goals 6 in the first quarter, but after quarter time they were absolutely in control of the match the rest of the way home. They win this one 14-14, 98, played 10-9, 69. So, yeah, Sydney too good here. Stats, Sydney had plus 25 inside 50s, which is a pretty big number. Both teams obviously pretty good at it, both 6-1, so you imagine that they're both pretty good at inside 50s. Shots plus 7 for Sydney. Disposal efficiency was down for both teams, around about the mark that Port Adelaide were, but you got to remember, first quarter was dry, second quarter absolutely bucketed down. It cleared up third and fourth quarter, but it's still going to be wet after the amount of rain that they had in that second quarter. So obviously both teams were down on disposal efficiency, and that also affects your forward efficiency and stuff like that as well. So they were not great in those areas either. compared to where they usually are, because both teams' forward efficiency is usually over 50%, whereas here Sydney were 37.3 and GWS were 42.8. So both teams were down, but you can kind of attest that to the dampness of the game, especially in that second quarter. Other factors, I mean, Sydney pretty much looked in control of the match most of the way. GWS did lead early, especially in that first quarter, but you kind of felt like Sydney were always in control of the match. And I think that's how it kind of played out. Tom McCartan got subbed out. He got knocked out. I think Brown has... I don't know if he has been offered anything or not, but I would imagine he's probably going to be suspended. And Tom Green for GWS, which was a massive loss. He, I think, hurt his ankle, so he'll be a watch whether he's playing this week or not. Obviously, losing one of, if not their best midfielder early in the game was never going to be very handy for them. For Sydney, put a blanket over about 6 or 7 people who was best on ground, who gets the Brownlow votes. Could go to any of them. Seriously, they were very, very good, all of them. I gave the highest rating of the match to Dane Rampy with a 96. I thought he was exceptional across the back line. He got a lot of intercepts. He was very, very important. 94 to Brodie Grundy, who was the best ruckman of the round. He was very, very good. And Will Hayward also a 94. He kicked 4 goals. He was very important up forward. Heaney continues to dominate. I think he's now played all 8 games this year and had 20 plus disposals and a goal in every game. So that's an incredible achievement from him. He's been very good. Rowbottom was a 91. Warner was a 90. Errol Goulden was an 89. So all their big names were very good. Big drop off to the rest of them. So they did have some average players. But those guys absolutely dominated, and pick who you want to, who was best on ground. I went Rampy because I really enjoyed the way he was intercepting the ball for GWS. Jack Buckley, number 1 on the ground for me. Then James Peatling was huge. He had a lot of it. I think close to 30 touches, kicked a goal. He was very important for them, especially after Tom Green getting injured. Callahan was a 91. Ward an 89. Sam Taylor returned and he was an 86, which is about his average for the year. I think I have him at an 87 average. Himmelberg was good, 84. Key note here, Josh Kelly was an 81, so he's about 7 below his average this week. And yeah, Toby Green, 70, so he's also like 7 or 8 below his average. And his average this year is a lot lower than what it would have been last year. So, room to improve for GWS. They didn't show their best stuff here, but Sydney, I think, can claim that they are the best team in New South Wales right now. And as well as that, they might even be able to say that they are the best team in the AFL right now. The absolute depth and domination that their midfield can do is nothing else in the league. Brodie Grundy is ruckman. He's back to his best. He's in top 3 or 4 ruckman, hands down. Then you got Isaac Heaney, who's one of, if not the informed midfielders. He's probably, him and Bontempelli are clearly the best 2 midfielders in the game at the moment. You chuck in Warner, you chuck in Goulden, you chuck in everybody else who's doing stuff. Rowbottom more of a defensive midfielder. Taylor Adams has come in. Luke Parker hasn't even played, and this whole midfield is just looking very, very frightening for opposition. I think they've got a bit of work to do up forward. They rely on their midfielders to kick goals, but obviously Hayward kicked 4 this week, so that was important for them. But I think that's the main thing that they need to work on is creating goals from forward line players. Papley was a bit quiet. Amati's okay. He kicks his one or two, but I haven't seen enough to suggest yet that he's someone that can kick 5 and win a game off his boot. But he could prove me wrong. And I mean, as he develops, he may well get there sooner rather than later. So that was the first game on Saturday. Billed was a massive game and didn't quite live up to it, but it was entertaining nonetheless. Game number 4 of the round. This was not billed to be quite so exciting. St Kilda v North Melbourne. Obviously 2-5 St Kilda going up against the 0-7 Kangaroos. Just a side note, Kangaroos wore their semi-retro outfits, and it is one of my favourite tops that I've ever worn, and it was a cracker. So Kangaroos, keep wearing that top. I like it. This game, obviously, as expected, St Kilda won this one comfortably. They kicked 15-13, 103 to North Melbourne's 10-5-65. So St Kilda, who are one of the lowest scoring teams, went up against Kangaroos, who are the worst defence. And a positive for Kangaroos is they usually concede 123 a game, and they only conceded 103. So that's a 20-point turnaround for them. So got to take the positives where we can. Granted, St Kilda are one of the worst offences, so we probably didn't expect them to score too highly. What else have we got? Forward efficiency is typically Kangaroos' worst stat. They weren't too bad at it. They broke even with St Kilda. Something that they're pretty good at is accuracy, and that kind of continued. They kicked 10 goals 5 from 16 shots. So they'll probably stay as the number 1 most accurate team in the AFL, I would imagine, after this week. I haven't done the full wrap up on those numbers yet, but I would imagine they would be. Kangaroos, the worst team going forward in the league in terms of getting inside 50s, and that kind of continued. So they're minus 14 a game, and they went minus 25. So worse than usual in that regard. St Kilda, obviously not one of the better teams in the AFL at that, but this certainly will help their numbers for the year. Going plus 25 is pretty massive, kind of like Collingwood Carlton. Similar discrepancy there. Clearances dominated by St Kilda, which kind of you expect in these contests, I think. Marks and therefore uncontested possession were dominated by St Kilda. They were plus 56 in uncontested possessions and plus 59 in marks. So that's a pretty big domination in that area of the game. Kangaroos did bring decent pressure. They had 69 tackles to 64, so that was at least a positive, although St Kilda are one of the worst tackling teams in the league. As expected, St Kilda wins reasonably comfortably. The first quarter kind of looked like North Melbourne were going to give it a bit of a run, but then they kind of got blown away a bit in the second quarter, and that was about all she wrote. She just kind of stayed similar after that. Best players on the ground, Jack Sinclair, I gave it 98. He had a couple goals, plenty of the ball. Also gave him the 3 Brownlow votes. Darcy Wilson, a 94. Rowan Marshall, he's continued his great season. He's 92. Bradley Hill, he's been very good this year. He's been back to his best. A 90 for him with 2 goals. Wangani Malera, he's been very good all year too. He's an 89. Jack Steele, an 89. Jack Hayes, an 89. Just an all-round really good performance from most of St Kilda's players. And to be honest, probably could have won by more than they did. 63 inside 50s for 15 goals is not terrible. But I would expect them to kind of probably kick a little bit better than they, or win by a little bit more than they did, based on how good so many of their players were. Over on North Melbourne's side of the fence, McKercher, I think, was their best player. He was very good. I gave him a 91. Tristan Xerri, he's continuing on his great season. He's showing that he's a very good ruckman. 90, Wardlaw 88, Zach Fisher 85, Aris Sheasel 83, and Luke Davies-Yanaki also 83. Zerha kicked 3 goals. He was solid. Larky kicked a couple, but overall, North Melbourne just aren't quite the class of St Kilda. No injuries, I don't think, from this game. Nothing too interesting to note. Yeah, that sums up that game. I think nothing too interesting to note. St Kilda fight back their season. They're back to 3 and 5, and they have a massive game this weekend down in Launceston against Hawthorn. They're sitting 3 and 5. They win this one, they go 4 and 5, and we can't write off their season. Remember, it was only 6 weeks ago they beat Collingwood, and absolutely, they won by 15 points, but it felt like they won by more than 15 points that day. So yeah, massive game for both teams, Hawthorn and specifically St Kilda, to try and get their season really going back. Obviously they're 3 and 5 now. That would get them to 4 and 5, which all of a sudden puts them back into top 8 contention. I don't think they are a top 8 team, but they could get on a run. Remember, this time last year Carlton were nowhere near the 8, and look at what happened with them. So stranger things have happened. We then go to Saturday night football, and we'll start with the Melbourne game, which was MCG, Melbourne v Geelong. Probably the 2 best Victorian teams at the moment in the AFL. And it went down to the wire. Melbourne 5 and 2 going in, Geelong 7 and 0. Geelong suffer their first loss of the season. It was bound to happen. They've been playing close game after close game, and this time they couldn't get over the line. Melbourne kicked 5 straight in the last quarter, which was huge, because before that they were 5 goals 14, so they were struggling with accuracy. They kind of turned it around in the last quarter when they needed to, and Bailey Fritsch kicked an absolute ripper to seal it. So go have a look at that, because that's a goal that not many people can kick, and he did it in the 4th quarter with the game on the line. So good effort from him. Key areas of this game, what can we say? Melbourne had one of the higher kick to handball ratios you'll see. 2.3 kicks to every handball. They were +2 in inside 50s, so both teams were very level in that, which that's a massive win for Melbourne, because if you look at the stats on the screen, going into this game they were 15th in the league at inside 50 differential, so to go +2 is huge for them. They were +3 in shots for the game, so not a massive discrepancy there. Clearances were very level across both teams. Melbourne did better out of the centre, whereas Geelong were better at the ground clearances, stoppage clearances even. Contested ball, uncontested ball, not much in it. Melbourne dominated contested marks, which suggests that they were just better on the day. +8 in contested marks. Tackles very similar. So I think very even game, kind of what we'd expect from both these teams, because I mean you look at them and they're pretty level across a lot of the stat categories going into the game, and they were pretty level going out of the game. I think the main thing was that Melbourne actually moved the ball very well and got the ball forward a lot more than they usually do, and that's probably the part of the game that won it for them, in my opinion. Obviously both teams below their usual scoring, but that tends to happen in these tight top ladder tussles, I think. So not too much to read about in that. Accuracy for both teams, which going into the game was strong suit for both, was certainly not the strong suit here. 10 goals 14 for Melbourne and 9 goals 12 for Geelong, so they both lower their colours in that regard. Anything interesting to note? Tanner Bruin got injured. Other than that, I don't think there was any other injuries. Best on ground, I gave Clayton Oliver. Gave him a 95. He was very good. Jake Lever, I think, has had a up and down season, but the ups have been very good. I gave him a 91. Caleb Windsor an 89. Petraka 88. Judd McPhee and Max Gawn 86s. Bailey Fritsch, as I said, kicked a great goal. He kicked 3 for the match. I think he was more active around the ground than he has been this year, so I think that was one of his better performances. Over on the Geelong side of the fence, Zach Guthrie, I think, was their best. He was very good, 94. Max Holmes a 91. Tom Atkins was very good, 90. De Koning is putting together a good season, 85. And then a drop down to Tom Stewart at 81. He was solid, but not outstanding. Bit of conjecture not conjecture, but a bit of talk in the media this week about the form of Tom Hawkins. I don't think Geelong have got too much to worry about in that sense at the moment. 7-1, it's not too much of an issue. He's a big body. You don't need to be doing your best at 35 years of age in round 8. If your team's 7-1, you're cruising at the moment. I think it's all about making sure he stays fit and healthy, and try to peak him as close to the end of the year as you can at this point. I think that would be their plan. They'd be silly not to have that as their plan, in my opinion. Saturday night there was another game. This one was over in the West Coast hosting Essendon. And another tight fought game. Essendon take this by 6 points. There was a point there where I thought maybe Essendon were going to get 2 draws in a row, but it wasn't to be. Essendon got the win. They just did enough to hold on in the end, even though West Coast came hard late, but they were running out of legs. They didn't have much to give. I mean, Essendon probably were running out of legs as well, but it was a good game to watch. Both Saturday night games were very close and very entertaining. Inside 50s, Essendon absolutely dominated that, plus 16, which Essendon aren't dominant at inside 50s, but West Coast are one of the worst teams at that. Interestingly enough, West Coast did have one extra shot at goal, which, looking at the scoreboard, you'd be like, how the hell have they done that? So, let's just read out these numbers. West Coast, 24 shots, 11 goals, 5. So that suggests that 8 times they didn't score when having a shot at goal. Meanwhile, Essendon, 23 shots, 11-11. So, yes, they had more scoring shots, Essendon, but apparently had less shots at the goal, which is crazy. Not something that you see too often. Clearances were very level, which after Essendon dominated clearances the week before was slightly surprising. Essendon, one of the top teams at clearances all year, especially last week. West Coast not a team that's known for being good in the clearances, but Eagles did pretty well in that. Probably a key factor in why they were still in the game. Tackles also plus 22 for Essendon, so they are a good tackling team, and once again they showed that. But I think both teams were just out on their feet in that last quarter, and in the end the Bombers did enough to hold off the Eagles. Key things from this game: Elliot Yeo did get injured. I think it was around 3/4 time-ish. He didn't play after that. Noah Long also got injured for the Eagles. Over on the Essendon side of the fence, Jai Caldwell got subbed out, injured as well. Best player on the ground, I don't think there's any conjecture here, was Zach Merritt. He was very, very good. He had 3 goals and 29 touches. He was great. Nick Martin was huge for Essendon, as was Darcy Parish, who's all of a sudden back to his best form. Sammy Durham was great. Mackay was great in the back line. Dersma, McGrath, all good. Langford kicked 3 goals. He continued his great season. Over on the West Coast side of the fence, obviously Elliot Yeo getting injured was obviously going to hurt them. He's been their best player this year, quite clearly. So that definitely hurt them. Outside of him, Tim Kelly was very good at 94. Tom Barras returned after suspension. He was 93. Jack Williams kicked 3 goals. I gave him 86. Bailey J. Williams, an 84. He was very good in the ruck. Waterman, he kicked 3. He tried his absolute heart out. Gave him an 82, and he could have been a hero. He had a mark 25 metres out. And as he was going back to line up, his teammate pushed someone over and the kick got reversed, and who knows what could have happened if he had put that one through the big sticks. But in the end, Essendon, better team on the night, I think, but West Coast gave it their absolute all. And you got to think, maybe they're not far off. Yeah, it's always a tough game for Essendon going to Optus Stadium, but this West Coast team is almost there. I don't know about how many games, if any, Elliot Yeo is going to miss yet, but he will be a massive out if he's not playing this week. They're heading down to Melbourne to play against Collingwood on Sunday. So they're looking a lot better than certainly they were after round 2 or 3 when I was ready to write their obituaries, but they're going all right. Move on to Sunday football. This one, the other Perth team, Fremantle travelled down to the MCG to play Richmond. Richmond 1-6 going in, Fremantle 4-3. Outside of the fact that it was at the MCG, you have to think Fremantle going in heavy favourites, and they showed that in the end. They win at 15-13, 103 to Richmond's 6 goals, 13-49. Domination basically sums it up. Fremantle not known for scoring very big, cracked 100, so that's massive for them. Known for defending well, they kept them to 49. Granted, they kicked 6 goals, 13. However, a lot of them were rushed, I think. I think they only had 17 shots, Richmond, for the match, so a little bit not an accurate reading there. Yeah, Richmond just struggling. 17th worst scoring team in the league and score 49, so that's not going to help them. Inside 50s plus 21 for Fremantle, who are not a great inside 50 team. They constantly get beaten in inside 50s, but it doesn't usually hurt them. So to go plus 21 is huge. As I suggested, 30 shots for Fremantle to 17 for Richmond, so they did dominate that facet. Disposal efficiency was very, very high for both teams. Fremantle always run it very high, 76.37 usually. They did 77.2, but even Richmond were very high, so that suggests that maybe Fremantle matches are not as high pressure as some others. Free kick count was dominated by Fremantle, not that matters too much, I don't think. Clearances 36-16 is a massive discrepancy, especially centre clearances. Fremantle are a great clearance team. Obviously, they got Sarong, they got Fife, they got some guns in there. 14-5 in centre clearances. Uncontested ball was absolute whitewash. Marks, whitewash. Pretty much everything a whitewash. Plus 20 in tackles for Fremantle as well. So Richmond just aren't at the level. Granted, they're not their best team. They have a lot of injuries. We all know that. But at the end of the day, Fremantle just destroyed them across the field, and that kind of showed. No injuries for Richmond, which was a positive for them. I don't think Fremantle had any of note either. Interesting that Fife started as sub. I do not understand that at all. He's coming off his best game of the year last week, where best game in probably 3 years actually, and they start him as sub. Like, in my opinion, he should have started the game, and if they're cruising, then sub him out. Sure, starting him as sub, I think, was a weird decision from them. But hey, they're the experts, not me. Best players. I gave Sarong the 3 votes for a 96. However, Hayden Young, I gave a 98. I thought he was outstanding. Luke Ryan 95, Brayshaw 93, and Matthew Johnson was good with 89. Tracy kicked 4 goals for Fremantle. He was an 86. Fife obviously started sub, so we kind of ignore his score a bit. Over on the Richmond side of the fence, she was bleak reading across the board. Vlosten, an 85. Martin was solid with 83, but Tyler Sonsi was 83. But it's just not great reading for them, unfortunately. They're just struggling a bit at the moment. They need to start getting some players back. I think that starts to happen maybe this week or the week after, but they've just got too many young players and too many players that aren't quite up to it at the moment. But that's football. You can't control injuries, and that's kind of their issue at the moment. So they continue to struggle at 1 and 7, whereas Fremantle all of a sudden are back to 5 and 3, 1-2 in a row, and their weird season where they went win 3, lose 3, they've now won 2, so they're fighting their way back into it, and all of a sudden we have faith in them again. Sunday afternoon, the biggest upset of the round. Western Bulldogs got done by Hawthorn. So Doggies have been inconsistent all year. They were inconsistent all of last year, and they were inconsistent all the year before. Since 2021, they have kind of struggled with going up and down, and they keep showing that. 2 weeks ago, they were outstanding against St Kilda. Last week, they were solid against Fremantle over in the West. They came back, played Hawthorn, and were ordinary. Yeah, granted, they lost by 7 points. 14-7-91 to 14-14-98, so they were in it. But Hawthorn were going into this game 1 and 6 and not looking good at all. 18th best offence, Hawthorn, going into this game, and they kicked 98 points. 16th worst defence, and they conceded less than that, their average. So a great performance from them. I don't know what's going on with the Doggies. I really can't tell you. Something's going on, and what that is, I don't think they would know. If they did, they'd probably fix it. So possessions were very similar. Bulldogs were a bit more handbally than Hawthorn, but nothing of concern there. That's kind of how they play football. Hawthorn did kick it a bit more than usual, which probably is a good sign for them. Inside 50s, there was only one difference between them, so nothing of note there. Disposal efficiency was very similar. Hawthorn did have an extra 8 shots, so that's a sign that they played better, or at least created more chances. Clearances, though, Bulldogs dominated, and especially centre clearances. Even though it was only 12-9, I think Bulldogs kicked 4 goals to 0 from centre clearances, so that's where they do their best work, clearly. But outside of centre clearances, they kind of struggled to create opportunities for themselves. I think the biggest factor in this game, in my opinion at least, is the turnover count. Bulldogs had 68, which isn't huge, but when you look at Hawthorn, who only had 48 turnovers, that is one of the lower numbers you'll read this year in the turnover book. So, Hawthorn just didn't make mistakes when they had the ball, and that kind of shows. Was that because of Bulldogs' lack of pressure? Maybe. In my opinion, Bulldogs didn't really bring the defensive pressure as well as maybe they should have. And maybe not. Hawthorn did win the tackle count by 13, which shouldn't happen. Bulldogs going into this game are the 4th best tackling team and Hawthorn were the 18th best. And somehow Hawthorn out-tackle them. It doesn't make a lot of sense there, but hey, that's football sometimes. Some days, some teams just don't show up and others do. Hawthorn were good, don't get me wrong. They did everything they needed to. But I put this squarely on the Bulldogs just not performing. Because I think if the Bulldogs perform, then there's not a chance that Hawthorn get close to them, in my opinion. Injuries, Libba, he's got concussed. He's also been rubbed out for a week anyway, but he wouldn't be playing because he's out with concussion. Over on Hawthorn side, nothing too serious. Sicily popped out a shoulder. He was the walking wounded at late and then ended up kicking what it was the winning goal. But he did play out the game. Best players, we'll start with the Bulldogs because I think that was the Bontempelli's best game of anyone's best game of the season, in my opinion. He was absolutely massive, carried the team almost over the line, but couldn't quite get them there. I gave him a perfect 100, the first perfect 100 of the season. After him, Treloar and English were 88s, Norton 87, Libba 85. A few players underperformed. Bailey Dale was an 83. He's a little bit off there. McRae struggled. He only got 74. Johannesson struggled. Just most of their team kind of struggled a little bit. Over on the Hawthorn side of the fence, Dylan Moore has put together just about the best 3 weeks in the AFL. I've given him a 96. He's been very good 3 weeks in a row. Impey was good, 92. Connor Nash was good. Lloyd Meek was very good in the ruck. That's his best game that I've seen, I think. Joe Newcombe was very good. Note about Newcombe, he seems to be very good when Hawthorn are playing well. When Hawthorn aren't playing well, he's not so good. So whether he's the barometer or Hawthorn are the barometer, and depends how he plays. But I don't know which way it goes. Who knows? I could be completely wrong there as well. Sicily was good, as I said, he kicked the winning goal. So yeah, Hawthorn somehow win that one. They go to 2-6, and all of a sudden, North Melbourne are falling further behind. They only 1 game behind Richmond, but they're falling behind every other team. One final game of the weekend was our Sunday night game. Not sure how I feel about Sunday night football. I know that it's public holiday up in Queensland and New South Wales tomorrow, so that's why they could do it. But I don't know if it was great for me. I wanted to go to bed and sleep, but we stayed up and we watched it. It didn't finish that late, let's not get that wrong. I mentioned earlier that North Melbourne's tops this weekend were on point. They need to play in them more often. This is a note to Gold Coast. Get rid of the blue. They are disgusting. I do not like them. Get rid of them. They're gone. Get rid of them. Get a different clash top, please. Because blue just isn't it. Blue with the white shorts just ain't it. Yeah, so anyway, on to the actual match and not what players were wearing. The fashion of the match. And this was... Brisbane needed the win and they got the win. They won 10-19-79 to 6-9-45. And when I say they did it the hard way, I mean they did it the hard way. First of all, Starkovic got rubbed out, got injured like 5 minutes before the game, got ruled out of the game. So then they had to bring in Logan Morris, a debutant, who had already played in the VFL that day, just like 4 hours before that. had Macca's for dinner and then turns up and plays a game of AFL in someone that's 2 sizes smaller than him shoes. Crazy story. And then to make things worse, Darcy Gardner, first Lincoln McCarthy is out. He's done. Gone within 5 minutes of the match. 5 minutes later, Noah Answorth and Darcy Gardner are also out. So they're down to 1 on the bench and... or 2 on the bench. 2 on the bench, sorry. And already used their sub. They were in absolute trouble from the start. So 2 ACLs in that. So a rough night for the Lions, but at least they got the win to give them something for the night. In terms of the match, Brisbane dominated possession. They just dominated the game. 347 disposals to 304. So that was huge. Inside 50s, 64 to 46, which kind of follows the whole weekend, really, of one team dominating inside 50s. It happened quite a few times. Shots 29 to 15 for Brisbane. Key factor there. Forward efficiency. Brisbane struggle with this, and Gold Coast do, granted, as well, but Brisbane have struggled with this more than most this year. They were slightly up on their usual, so that was pretty good, whereas Gold Coast were way below. Clearances were reasonably similar, nothing to note there. Gold Coast turned it over too many times. 148 marks for Brisbane is absolutely insane. Suggests that Brisbane just had too much uncontested ball. They had too much ball, full stop, but too much uncontested ball. They just controlled the play and did what they liked, which was probably just as well because they probably didn't want the game to be too fast, because they had so many injuries. They won. Kicked 10 goals, 19, and won by 34 points. Best players in the game. First of all, Dane Zorko, hats off to him. I gave him a 99. He had 44 touches. He had 15 odd marks. He did pretty much everything he needed to. He was outstanding. Lachie Neale was very good, 96. Dunkley was huge. He kicked a goal, 95. Harris Andrews down back was his consistent self. I think he's in the top 3 tall defenders this year. He got a 94. And then McCluggage 88, Danaher 85. Pretty much everybody on the Brisbane team played big minutes because they didn't have rotations. I think a key point of that is Oscar McInerney, who played, I think, 123 out of 125 minutes. As a ruckman, that's a fair effort from him. Over on Gold Coast side, no one was outstanding. Will Powell, I gave 88. Anderson was good with 87. Atkins 83. Flanders 82. Miller 82. Matt Rowell was the biggest one below average. He was a 74, which is about 14 or 15 below his average. So that was he wasn't at his best. And overall, Gold Coast weren't at their best. And they lost by 30 odd points. So they dropped to 4 and 5 with a whole gang of other teams. Brisbane, they moved to 3 and 5, and all of a sudden there's a spark. Granted, they copped a few injuries, so that could hurt them going forward, but there is at least a little bit of a flicker on their season. So that's the final game of the round. We'll just quickly have a look at what's coming up this weekend. As I said, there will be a Wednesday episode, as always, of the podcast, previewing round 9 of the football. This week, we've got Thursday night football, Carlton, Melbourne. Friday night, we've got a doubleheader, Geelong, Port Adelaide, and then Fremantle, Sydney. Doubleheader that kind of overlaps a little bit by about half of football. Saturday, Hawthorn, St Kilda, followed by Essendon, GWS. And then Saturday night, we have Richmond Bulldogs and Gold Coast, North Melbourne. Sunday, we have Collingwood Eagles and Adelaide Brisbane. So we're going to finish the round with a cracking game. Adelaide Brisbane both sitting 3 and 5 and seasons on the line. Both have got a win last week just to resurrect their season a little bit. But will it be enough? We will have to see. Hour-long episode, this one. Longest episode yet. I had a lot to get through. I talked a lot. I hope you enjoyed. As always, follow me on all my socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of the above. Like the video, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate you if you've stuck around. If you watched just a little bit, I appreciate it nonetheless. As I said, episode 22, the round 9 preview will be out on Wednesday. Thanks for listening. I'll catch us on the next one.